My late wife's necklace was the only thing I had left of her. When I couldn't find it, my daughter said the necklace was sold. I needed the money for a vacation. When I called the pawn shop to try to get the necklace back, they said, "Sir, you won't believe what we found when we opened the medallion on the pendant." I didn't know it opened. I am Morgan Price, 71 years old, and I was tearing my bedroom apart. It started Tuesday morning. I wasn't looking for my keys or my wallet. I was looking for Serena. Not her, of course. My Serena has been gone for 2 years now. I was looking for the only piece of her I had left, her necklace. My breath started to get shallow, and a cold sweat, the kind that comes from pure panic, began to creep up my back. I am a retired structural engineer. I am a logical man. I put things where they belong. And Serena, she was even more organized than me. She kept it in the small oak jewelry box on her dresser. A box I built for her with my own 2 hands back in 1985. The box was still there, right where it always was, catching the morning light from the bedroom window. I opened the lid. It was empty. The faded red velvet lining where the necklace always rested was bare. My hands started to shake. I began pulling out drawers, tossing aside old cufflinks and tie clips. This was wrong. This was deeply wrong. Serena never took that necklace off. Not in 40 years of marriage. The only time she did was in the hospital right before she passed. She had pressed it into my hand, her skin as frail as paper, and made me promise to keep it safe. "This is more important than you know, Morgan," she had whispered, her voice weak. "Keep it safe, especially from Alicia." I thought she was just delirious from the medication. I thought she was just worried like I was about our daughter's spending habits. Now her words echoed in my head like a warning siren. I looked around the room, desperate. The necklace wasn't flashy. It wasn't covered in diamonds. It was a simple, heavy silver chain with a single jade and silver locket. It was the first thing I ever bought her with my first real paycheck as a young engineer right here in Atlanta. I'd spent almost everything I had on it. I could still see her face the moment I gave it to her, the way her eyes lit up in our tiny apartment. Now the absence of it felt like a physical hole in the room. It felt like losing her all over again. I checked under the bed. I went through the pockets of the coats in her closet. I even looked in the bathroom cabinet behind the aspirin. Nothing. I sat heavily on the edge of the bed, the empty oak box in my lap. The panic was fading, replaced by something colder, something harder. I started to think, who had been in this room? I live alone. My neighbors, they're good people. We look out for each other, but they don't come into my bedroom. Only family. Only Alicia, my daughter. She had been here 3 days ago. I remembered it clearly because she had asked for money. Again. "Dad, I just need $500, just to float us until Kyle's big project lands." It was always a big project with Kyle, always just around the corner. I had looked at my daughter, 38 years old, and felt that familiar heavy pang of disappointment. I told her no. It was the 3rd time I'd said no this month. "Alicia, you and your husband need to learn to live within your means," I'd told her, my voice gentle but firm. "I am not your personal bank." She had stormed out of the house, slamming the front door so hard the frame rattled. I hadn't heard from her since. My mind immediately went to her husband, Kyle Miller. Ever since Alicia married that man, everything in her life became about money, about appearances. Kyle, a sharp-dressed, fast-talking white man who claimed to work in software sales. He always had a new watch, always drove a leased luxury car that looked ridiculous parked in my gravel driveway, and he always looked at my house with a little smirk. This house. The one I designed and built with my own hands in this quiet, working-class black neighborhood in southwest Atlanta. It's a good, solid brick house. It's got good bones. It's full of memories of Serena, of raising Alicia. But to Kyle, it was just an old house in a developing neighborhood. That's the word he always used. Developing. He looked at me like I was a relic, a problem to be managed. I remembered him at our last family barbecue, standing awkwardly in the corner of my backyard, holding a bottle of beer he wasn't drinking. He was the only white face there, and he acted like he was doing us all a favor just by breathing our air. I trusted him about as far as I could throw my old pickup truck. And I knew deep in my gut he was the reason Alicia had changed from a loving, if complicated, daughter into this greedy, resentful stranger. She had been in the house. She had been in my room. She'd said she was going to use the bathroom, but she was gone for 10, maybe 15 minutes. Keep it safe, especially from Alicia. Serena's words. My God. Serena knew. She knew exactly what our daughter was capable of. I picked up my phone. My hand was steady now. The panic was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, hard focus. I dialed her number. She picked up on the fourth ring. Her voice was too breezy, too loud. I could hear music in the background. "Hey, Dad, what's up?" "Alicia, I can't find your mother's necklace." The music in the background didn't stop, but her voice did. The silence stretched for 5 full seconds. It was so loud it was practically a confession. "Oh, which necklace, Dad?" she said, her voice suddenly strained, fake. "She had a few, right? You know exactly which one, Alicia. The jade locket, the one she never took off, the one that was in her box on my dresser." "Oh, that one. Gosh, I don't know, Dad. I haven't seen it. I'm actually really busy right now. I'm packing." My blood ran cold. Packing? Packing for what? "Oh, it's crazy." Her voice was unnaturally high. "Kyle surprised me with a trip to Cabo we're leaving tonight. He said I've been so stressed I deserve a break, you know." Cabo. The trip she couldn't afford 3 days ago. The trip that probably cost about as much as a 40-year-old silver necklace would fetch at a pawn shop. I stood up. I walked to the living room window and looked out at the old oak tree Serena and I had planted when we first moved in. "Alicia," I said, and my voice was so cold it surprised even me. "I want you to come home. Now." "Dad, I can't. We have a flight. It's all paid for. I'll help you look for it when we get back, I promise. If you are not at this house in 30 minutes with Kyle, I am calling the police and reporting that necklace stolen, and I will tell them exactly who I believe took it." The line went silent again. "Dad, you wouldn't—" "30 minutes, Alicia." I hung up the phone. I sat down in my old armchair, the one facing the front door. And I waited. They arrived in less than 20 minutes. Kyle's leased high-gloss BMW pulled up far too fast, crunching the gravel in my driveway. The engine cut off with an aggressive silence. I opened the front door before they even had a chance to knock. They stood there on my porch, a perfect toxic pair. Alicia, my daughter, was already dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, a performance she had perfected since she was 6, but her eyes were bone dry. Kyle stood slightly in front of her like a cheap bodyguard pointedly checking the expensive watch on his wrist. He was wearing a polo shirt so tight it looked like it was cutting off his circulation. "Morgan, what is so urgent?" he said. He never called me Dad or even Mr. Price, just Morgan, like we were equals, like he hadn't just appeared in my life 5 years ago and started poisoning my daughter's mind. "We have a flight to catch in 3 hours. He continued, smelling of sharp cologne and impatience. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. I kept my eyes locked on Alicia. She was 38 years old, but right then she looked like a guilty teenager. "The necklace, Alicia. Where is it?" The fake sobs began immediately. "Dad, I don't know why you're accusing me," she whimpered, half hiding behind Kyle's shoulder. "I told you on the phone I haven't seen it. Why would you think I just stared. I am a patient man. I spent my life as a structural engineer. I know that if you apply steady, silent pressure, eventually the structure reveals its weakest point." I said nothing. I just let her perform, let the silence hang in the hot, humid Atlanta air. Alicia looked down, unable to meet my gaze. But Kyle was not a patient man. He was the weak point. He let out an exasperated sigh, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Oh, for God's sake, Alicia, just tell him," he snapped. He turned his cold blue eyes on me, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated disdain. "Look, Morgan," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "It's just an old piece of jewelry. We needed cash, ASAP, $1,200 to be exact. The trip to Cabo was non-refundable, and we were a little short. It's not a big deal." I felt the air leave my lungs. He said it so simply, so casually, like he was explaining a banking transaction, not like he was admitting to being an accomplice in the theft of his dead mother-in-law's most sacred possession. He had no soul. Seeing Kyle admit it, Alicia's fake tears vanished. They were replaced by something else. Something hot, ugly, and defensive. Rage. "Yes, fine, I sold it!" she screamed, stepping out from behind Kyle. Her face, the face I had loved for 38 years, was red and twisted into a sneer I didn't recognize. "Are you happy now?" "I sold it. I needed the money for a vacation." "Kyle's right. I deserve to have something good in my life. I deserve a break." I flinched, not at her words, but at the sheer venom behind them. This was not my daughter. This was a stranger. What do you care anyway? She spat, taking a step toward me. It was just sitting in a box, just like everything else in this house. She waved her hand around my living room. You know what Kyle calls this place the museum, because that's what it is. A dusty, sad old museum full of a dead woman's junk. A dead woman's junk. That's what Serena was to her. That's what 40 years of love, marriage, and memory amounted to. Junk. What are you even saving all this for, Dad? She continued, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. You live like you're poor. This house is in a bad neighborhood. You drive that stupid rusty truck. You wear the same 3 shirts. What is the point? Kyle says I deserve better. He says my mother would have wanted me to be happy, not to be tied down to some old man in a falling-apart house. My house. The house I built for them. The house I laid the foundations for with my own 2 hands, brick by brick. The house where I taught her to ride a bike. The house where Serena died. The entitlement was breathtaking. It was a physical force like a high wind pushing me back into my own living room. Kyle put his arm around her, smirking triumphant. She's right, Morgan. It's time to live in the present. Serena is gone. It's just stuff. We did you a favor, really. We're using it. We're creating new happy memories. You should be thanking us. I couldn't speak. I felt dizzy. They weren't just admitting to the theft. They were proud of it. They were justifying it. They were telling me I was the one who was wrong. I finally found my voice. It came out as a hollow whisper. Serena's necklace. It was from me. Yeah, we get it, Alicia said, rolling her eyes with dramatic flair. Her anger was spent, replaced by Kyle's cold indifference. She dug into her expensive designer purse and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. You want it back so badly you can buy it back. If you care so much, go get it yourself. She threw the crumpled pawn ticket onto the coffee table. It skidded across the polished wood surface and stopped right next to a framed photo of Serena smiling. Now we have to go, Alicia said, her voice suddenly all business, all cold. We're going to miss our flight. Kyle opened the screen door, holding it for her. He looked back at me one last time. I was still standing in the doorway, frozen, unable to move. Have a good week, Morgan, he said with that chilling smirk. Try to get out more, and hey, maybe you should get some of this other junk appraised. You might have some more vacation money hiding in here. He laughed. A short, barking laugh. The door slammed shut. I heard the BMW's engine roar to life, spitting gravel as it reversed out of my driveway. Then they were gone. I sat there in the heavy silence of my living room. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a clock Serena had inherited from her mother. My eyes were fixed on that little white piece of paper on the table. A receipt. The receipt for my wife's soul. I gripped the small square ticket. Russo's pawn. I knew the place. It was an old, sad-looking brick building over on Memorial Drive, sitting there like a vulture waiting for things to die. Serena and I used to pass it on the way to the grocery store. She'd always look away when we drove by. She said places like that were built on the bones of desperation, and now my own daughter, my Alicia, had walked right through its doors and brought our family's desperation inside. I didn't grab my jacket. I didn't even lock the front door. I just grabbed my keys, the ones for my old pickup truck. The truck Kyle hated so much, the one he called a rust bucket. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were bone white. I was driving too fast for a 71-year-old man. I was driving like a man half my age, fueled by a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. The little bell above the door of Russo's shop gave a pathetic jingle as I walked in. The place smelled of dust, old cigars, and forgotten stories. A man who looked even older than me, with tired eyes and a beard that was more gray than black, looked up from his newspaper. This had to be Russo. My daughter was here, I said. My voice sounded gravelly unfamiliar. Alicia Price. She sold you a necklace, a silver locket, a jade stone in the middle. Russo let out a long, slow sigh, the kind of sigh a man breathes when he's seen the same sad story 1,000 times. Let me check the system, he said flatly. He turned to an old computer, his fingers tapping slowly on the keys. Ah, yeah, Price, Alicia. Came in yesterday. Gave her $1,200 cash for it. I need it back, I said, pulling my old leather wallet from my back pocket. I will pay you. Double. $2,500. Right now. Cash. My hands were shaking, fumbling with the bills. Russo held up one of his hands slowly. Sir, please. Slow down. I wish it were that simple. I don't have time to slow down, I snapped. That was my wife's necklace. My late wife's. The man's expression softened, but not with pity. It was just a tired empathy. Mr. Price, I am truly sorry. I can't sell it back to you. I can't. What do you mean, the law says you have to hold it? Russo shook his head, cutting me off. That's for a pawn, sir. When someone gets a loan, your daughter didn't pawn it. She sold it. Outright. The title transferred the second I gave her the cash. My online system listed it automatically. It's a unique piece, looks like custom work from the 70s. A collector in New York bought it, not an hour ago. He pointed to a small padded envelope on the counter behind him. It's already boxed up. UPS is picking it up in the next 20 minutes. Sold. The word hit me harder than Alicia's scream. Not pawned. Pawned means you have hope. Pawned means you intend to come back. Sold means it's over. It's gone. She had no intention of ever retrieving it. She had erased it. She had erased her mother. The fight just drained out of me. My shoulders slumped. I looked at the little envelope, the last piece of Serena sitting right there 10 feet away, already belonging to someone else. I see, I whispered. I felt dizzy. I couldn't even be angry anymore. I just felt empty. Thank you for your time, I mumbled, and I turned and walked out of the shop. The little bell jingled again like it was mocking me. I don't know how long I sat in my truck. I just stared at the steering wheel. The drive home was a blur. The city was a smear of colors and noise. I drove past the park where Serena and I used to walk. I drove past the library where she volunteered. Every street, every building was a ghost. I had failed her. I had failed the one promise she made me give. Keep it safe, especially from Alicia. What did she mean, it's more important than you know? Was it just the sentiment, or was it something else? Now I would never know. My phone rang, buzzing loudly on the passenger seat. I looked at the screen. An unknown number. I ignored it, letting it go to voicemail. I needed to be alone. It rang again immediately, insistent. Annoyed, I snatched it up. What? Mr. Price. Mr. Price. It's Russo. From the pawn shop. His voice was high, frantic. This wasn't the tired, bored man from the shop. This was a man in a panic. Mr. Price, you have to come back right now. Oh my God, sir, you just have to get back here. What are you talking about? You said it was sold. You said it was shipping. It was the collector. The man in New York. He just called me back. He's an expert. He called me and he was yelling. Sir, I can't explain over the phone. Just get back here, please. The line went dead. I made a U-turn in the middle of the street. The rusty tires of my old truck screamed against the pavement. I was back at the shop in less than 5 minutes, pulling in so fast I almost hit the curb. Russo was standing on the sidewalk waiting for me. He was pale, genuinely sickeningly pale. He was holding a tiny plastic bag in his trembling hand. What is it, Russo? What happened? Did he change his mind? Will he sell it back? Russo shook his head, looking stunned. The collector, he's an expert on antique jewelry. He said he recognized the clasp as custom work. He said he was examining the locket with a jeweler's loop and it felt wrong, unbalanced. What are you talking about? He found it, Mr. Price. A secret latch, right on the hinge hidden in the filigree design. He's a professional, so he knew how to open it. He opened the locket. My heart stopped. Opened it? I didn't know it opened. Oh, it opens, sir, Russo said, his voice dropping to a whisper. And what was inside? Sir, you won't believe what we found when we opened the medallion on the pendant. The collector, he said, this isn't jewelry. He said it's a storage device. He said the locket is hollow. And inside was this. Russo held up the tiny plastic bag. Inside was the smallest piece of black plastic I had ever seen. A micro SD card. What in God's name is that? I whispered. Russo looked at me, his eyes wide with a fear I was starting to share. That's not all, Mr. Price, the collector. He told me to tell you something. He said, tell the old man that whatever is on this chip, it's big, it's dangerous. And then he said, tell him to call his lawyer. Lawyer. Storage device. The words echoed in the cab of my old truck, making no sense. I was a structural engineer. I dealt with concrete and steel rebar and load-bearing walls. My world was solid, tangible. I could touch it. This was something else. This was a nightmare. I looked at the tiny plastic bag Russo had pressed into my palm. The micro SD card inside was no bigger than my pinky nail. It was an alien object. It didn't belong in my life. Who did I even know who could help me with this? My family was the enemy. Alicia, Kyle, they were in the air right now, flying to Cabo, laughing, spending the $1,200 they got for selling their mother's soul. I had no one else. Wait. Yes, I did. My hand still trembling from the adrenaline fumbled for my phone. I scrolled past Alicia's name. I kept going past the hardware store, past my doctor, until I found the name I hadn't called in 6 months. Howard. Howard Jackson. I pressed the call button. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Howard and I went way back. Way back. We had been the only 2 black engineers at the Thompson Price construction firm back in 1975. We were just kids trying to make our way in a world that wasn't built for us. We'd shared lunches in our trucks because the break room was cold. He'd been the best man at my wedding to Serena. He knew her. He knew me. Then about 20 years ago, Howard had gone back to school. He said he was tired of building things. He wanted to tear things down. He became a lawyer, a damn good one. He was the only person on this planet I trusted completely. He picked up on the second ring. Morgan Price. To what do I owe the honor, old man? Don't tell me you finally decided to sue your neighbor for that ugly fence. His voice was warm, familiar, and it almost broke me. Howard, I said, and my voice cracked. It came out as a desperate whisper. Howard, I need help. I'm in trouble. The humor in his voice vanished instantly. Morgan, you sound terrible. What's wrong? Where are you? The words tumbled out of me. It all sounded insane. Alicia. She stole Serena's necklace, the jade one. She sold it for a vacation to Cabo. She just left. That little... Howard started, but I kept going. I went to the pawn shop, Howard, Russo's on Memorial. It was already sold to a collector, but the collector, he just called Russo. He said the locket opens. It opens? Yes. And Russo, he said the man found something inside. A storage device. A little black chip. And he said... My voice dropped. He said I should call a lawyer. Silence. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound was the humming of my truck's engine. Howard was processing. The friend was gone. The lawyer was here. Morgan, he said, his voice now sharp-focused and cold as steel. Listen to me very carefully. Where are you right now? Exactly. I'm in my truck. I'm parked across the street from Russo's. Do not move, he commanded. Do not go home. Do not, under any circumstances, call Alicia or Kyle. Do not talk to anyone. I am leaving my office in downtown right now. I will be there in 15 minutes. Do you understand me? Yes, Howard, 15 minutes. Don't move. The line clicked dead. Howard was not a man who exaggerated. If he was this serious, then whatever Serena had hidden was more than just a secret. It was dangerous. True to his word, exactly 15 minutes later, a sleek black sedan pulled up behind my truck. Howard got out. He was 70 years old, same as me, but he wore a $3,000 suit like it was a pair of overalls. He looked sharp, powerful, and intensely worried. He didn't greet me. He just jerked his head toward the pawn shop. Let's go. We walked back in. Russo was behind the counter, looking even more nervous than before. Mr. Jackson, he said, nodding. He recognized Howard. Everyone in Atlanta with a legal problem knew Howard Jackson. Mr. Russo, Howard said, all business. My client is Morgan Price. You have something that belongs to his late wife. I need all the information you have. Now. Russo looked relieved to be handing this off. Of course, the collector, a Mr. Aris. He's a specialist in antique mechanisms. He's the one who found the chip. Russo slid a piece of paper with a New York phone number across the counter. Howard took it. He didn't look at me. He just stepped outside onto the sidewalk, pulled out his own phone, and made the call. I watched him through the dusty shop window. I couldn't hear everything, just fragments carried on the breeze. He started the call. "Mr. Harris, this is Howard Jackson. I am the attorney for Morgan Price, the husband of the late Serena Price. We understand you've come into possession of an item of hers." Howard went silent, listening. He was completely still. I watched him nod. "I understand," he said into the phone. He listened again for a long, long time. I saw him rub his temple. "Are you certain of that?" he asked. Another long pause. He turned his back to me, looking out at the traffic on Memorial Drive, his shoulders tensed. He lowered his voice, and I couldn't hear anything for several minutes. He was just listening. Finally, I heard him say, "Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable." He took a deep breath. "Yes, we will pay for your discretion, and we will of course compensate you fully for the original item. We need that necklace back, and we need the original card." He gave Mr. Harris an email address. "Send the encrypted file to this address. Immediately, we will wire the funds. Thank you. Thank you for your professionalism. You may have just saved a man's life." He hung up the phone. He stood on the sidewalk for a full minute, not moving, just staring at the traffic. He seemed to be collecting himself. He fixed the cuff of his shirt, straightened his tie, and then walked back into the pawn shop. His face grim. He looked at Russo. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Russo. My client and I will take it from here. You will be compensated for your time. Do not speak of this to anyone, especially not to a young woman named Alicia or a man named Kyle Miller. Am I clear?" Russo just nodded wide-eyed. "Crystal clear, Mr. Jackson." Howard put a hand on my shoulder. "Let's go, Morgan. We need to go to my office." We got into his immaculate luxury car. The quiet leather and the silent engine were a world away from my old truck. He didn't speak as he pulled into traffic. "Howard, for God's sake, what is it?" I finally burst out. "What did he say? What's on that chip?" Howard drove for another block, his eyes fixed on the road. When he stopped at a red light, he turned to me. His eyes were filled with a deep, profound sadness, a sadness I hadn't seen since the day we buried Serena. "Morgan," he said, his voice heavy. "The collector, he accessed the card. It's not just one file, it's hundreds, audio files, dated, organized, and backed up." I was confused. "Audio of what? What are you talking about?" Howard took a slow, deep breath. Serena knew Morgan. She knew something was terribly wrong. She knew she couldn't trust Alicia. She knew she couldn't trust Kyle. He paused, and the next words changed my entire world. For the last 10 years of her life, Serena was secretly recording her phone calls. We drove back to Howard's downtown office in his car. The silence was so thick I felt like I was suffocating on it. I just stared out the window at the Atlanta skyline, the familiar buildings of the city I helped build, but I didn't see any of them. All I could see was that tiny black chip, a storage device. My wife, my quiet, gentle Serena, had been a spy in her own home. Howard's office was on the 40th floor. It was all glass and dark wood, a place of power, a world away from my simple brick house. His assistant, a sharp young woman, met us at the door with a tablet. "Mr. Jackson, the encrypted file from Mr. Harris arrived. It's on your secure server." "Thank you, Keisha. Hold all my calls," Howard said. He led me into his personal office and shut the heavy oak door. The sound of the latch clicking into place felt final. He sat behind his massive desk and looked at me. "Morgan, are you ready for this? I mean, really ready. What that collector implied. Once we open this, there is no going back. You can't unknow what you're about to learn. Are you sure you want this?" I thought of Alicia's face twisted in rage, screaming about junk. I thought of Kyle's smirk as he left me in my living room broken. I thought of Serena's last words. "Keep it safe." "I have to, Howard," I said, my voice hoarse. "I have to know why." Howard nodded grimly. He turned to his computer, typed in a long password, and the file opened. It wasn't just a few files. It was a database, a lifetime of secrets, hundreds and hundreds of audio files, all meticulously organized into folders. Folders labeled Alicia, Kyle, Kyle and Alicia, and one that made my blood run cold, Miller's. "My God, Serena," Howard whispered, scrolling through the list. She wasn't just recording. She was building a case. At the very top was a single file labeled Read Me First MP3. Howard double-clicked it. And then Serena's voice filled the room. It wasn't the weak, frail voice from the hospital. It was her strong, clear voice from 3 years ago before the sickness took hold. It was the voice I missed so much it felt like a physical ache. "Morgan," she said, and I grabbed the arms of my chair. Hearing her speak my name after 2 years, it was like a ghost had just walked through the wall. "My love, if you are hearing this," she continued, her voice clear but strained as if she was trying not to cry. "Then I am gone, and it means Alicia. Alicia has done something to betray us, something that led you to this. I am so sorry, Morgan." I couldn't breathe. My eyes burned. "I had to keep this from you," Serena's voice said, a recording from the past that was explaining my entire present. "I had to do this. I cannot trust our daughter. I haven't been able to trust her for a long time. I am terrified of what she and that man Kyle are planning. I started this archive 10 years ago, right after I found the first letter. I needed you to have the truth, Morgan. All of it, no matter how much it hurts. Please, listen. Listen to who they really are. Protect yourself. Protect what we built. I love you." The audio clicked off. The office was silent again, but the air was charged heavy. Howard looked at me, his eyes full of a pain that mirrored my own. He had loved Serena too. She was like a sister to him. He slowly moved his mouse, his hand shaking slightly. "Morgan, this is a recording from 3 years ago, just after they got married." He clicked play. I heard Alicia's voice, high and whining, a tone I knew all too well. "I can't just ask him for a down payment on a house. Kyle, Dad will say no. He'll just give me that same old speech about hard work and saving your money and building it yourself. He doesn't understand this is a different time." Then Kyle's voice. I'd never heard him speak like this. It wasn't the fake polite tone he used with me. This was smooth, patient, and absolutely venomous, like a snake whispering in her ear. "You don't ask, baby," he cooed. "You don't ask for things you are already entitled to. That old house he's rattling around in, it's going to be yours anyway when he's gone. That's how it works. We just need to speed up the process." My blood went cold. Speed up the process. What did he mean, speed up the process? Alicia sounded confused. "What does that mean? He's 70 years old, but he's perfectly healthy. He'll probably live another 20 years. "I'm not talking about physically, baby." Kyle laughed, a low, slick sound. "I'm talking mentally. He's an old man. He lives all alone in that big, empty house. He's lonely. He's forgetful. We just need to help him realize it. Help him. Yeah, you start small. You remind him of things he never said he'd do. You find his keys in the refrigerator after you put them there. You accidentally turn off the stove while he's cooking, then act all worried that he's leaving the gas on. You know, little things. You plant the seed, you make him and everyone else think he's the one who's old, he's the one who's confused." I felt sick. My stomach churned. I looked at Howard. He had his eyes closed, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Kyle's voice continued, wrapping its poison around my daughter. "We just need to make him seem unstable, unsafe. You start telling your friends, his neighbors, how worried you are. You suggest he needs assisted living for his own safety. You're his only daughter. You're his only family. It's your duty to take care of him. We get him to sign over power of attorney. And then, baby," he chuckled again, "we don't have to ask for anything ever again." The recording ended. I sat there, a 71-year-old man in a high-rise law office, and I finally understood. This wasn't just my daughter being selfish. This wasn't just her husband being a bad influence. This was a plan. A cold, calculated, multi-year conspiracy to destroy my mind, to have me declared incompetent, to steal everything I had ever worked for. The vacation, the necklace, that was just them getting impatient. This was the real prize. My God. I whispered the words, tasting like ash in my mouth. "Howard, they've been planning this for years." Howard opened his eyes. They were no longer sad. They were burning with a cold fury. He looked at the computer screen, at the long list of audio files. "Morgan," he said, his voice flat and dangerous. "That was file number 23, from 3 years ago. We're not even halfway through the list. I sat there frozen in Howard's leather chair, the echo of my daughter's voice planning my mental destruction still hanging in the air. I felt sick. My own child. My Alicia. Howard didn't say anything. He just looked at me, his face a mask of stone. He knew that any words of comfort right now would be useless. He simply moved his mouse. "There's more Morgan," he said, his voice quiet. "This next folder is labeled Millers." My blood ran cold. The Millers. Kyle's parents. Richard and Barbara. They were everything Serena and I were not. They lived in Buckhead in a massive white-columned house that looked like a movie set. They were members of the country club. They always seemed perfectly painfully polite. We'd had them over for dinner exactly twice. It was awkward. They looked at our handmade furniture and our simple food like they were visiting a zoo. Howard clicked on a file. The date stamp was from just 6 months ago, right after Serena's funeral. It was Kyle's voice, but he sounded different. He wasn't the smooth predator I heard whispering to Alicia. He sounded like a subordinate, an employee taking orders. "I'm working on it, Mother," he said, his voice sharp and annoyed. "I'm telling you, the girl is difficult. She's lazy. She just wants the money without doing the work." Then I heard her, Barbara Miller, Kyle's mother. Her voice wasn't the breezy, polite society voice I remembered from those awkward dinners. This voice was hard, cold, like chips of ice. "I am not interested in your complaints, Kyle," she snapped. "I am interested in results. Have you convinced that foolish girl to get control of Morgan Price's assets or not?" Kyle sighed. "I'm getting there. I'm pushing the confused old man angle just like we discussed. But are you sure it's worth this much effort? Why are we so focused on this one old retired engineer? What's the big deal? He lives in a dump in southwest Atlanta. What could he possibly have?" There was a pause, and then Barbara Miller laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was a cold, sharp, calculating laugh. "You really are an idiot, Kyle," she said. "You have your father's looks, but none of his brains. You think Morgan Price is just some old engineer? You think he just worked at Thompson Price Construction?" "What are you talking about?" Kyle asked. "I'm talking about the fact that your father and I did our homework. We don't move without doing our homework," Barbara said. "Morgan Price wasn't just at the company. He was a founding partner. He and Thompson started it in their 20s. Thompson was the face, but Price was the brains. He was the structural genius." I leaned forward. Howard met my eyes. He was just as stunned as I was. Barbara continued, her voice dripping with the venom of her discovery. "When he retired 2 years ago, just before his wife got sick, he sold his shares back to the firm. We had our contacts run the numbers. Do you know what he sold his 49% stake for, Kyle?" "I don't know. $1 million too." $18 million. Barbara hissed. $18 million. And he's been hiding it. He lives like a pauper in that dreadful little house. He drives that rusty old truck. He wears those old worn-out clothes, but he is loaded. He is sitting on a fortune, and he's just sitting on it. It's disgusting." My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't breathe. 18 million. It was 18.5, actually. I had sold my shares. I had cashed out. But how? How in God's name could she know that I never told a single soul? Not my banker, not my accountant, not even... My heart sank. Not even Serena. I had been so afraid of what the money would do to Alicia. I was afraid it would make her lazy, entitled. So I hid it. I put it in trusts, in offshore accounts, in places no one could find. I just wanted to live my simple life. I thought I was protecting my family. Kyle on the recording was silent. He was clearly in shock. 18 million? Yes, Barbara said, her voice full of triumph. And he has one heir. That's it. His only daughter, Alicia. Your stupid, naive little wife. She is the key to all of it. You just have to play your part, Kyle. You get that girl to have her father declared incompetent. You get her to sign over power of attorney to you before she ever realizes how much is really there. You secure the assets. We move him into a home. And the Price fortune, my dear, becomes the Miller fortune. Now stop failing me and get it done. The audio file clicked off. The silence in Howard's office was absolute. I stared at the computer screen. I was shaking. I wasn't just a grieving husband. I was a target. A multi-million-dollar target. I looked at Howard. My mind was shattered into 1,000 pieces. She knew. Barbara Miller. She knew the exact amount. How, Howard? How did she know I never told Serena? I swear to God, I never told my wife. Howard wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the computer screen at the file directory Serena had created. He wasn't looking at the audio folders anymore. He was looking at the other files, the ones that weren't MP3s. He saw a document file, a simple text file. It was labeled Serena Final TXT. Morgan, Howard said, his voice thick with emotion. I think you did tell her, or maybe she was just smarter than both of us. He moved the mouse and double-clicked the file. It wasn't a long letter, just a few paragraphs, but it was Serena's voice in my head as I read the words on the screen. My dearest Morgan, it began. If you are reading this, then the worst has happened. But I need you to know, I knew. I knew about the $18 million. I gasped. Howard put a hand on my shoulder. I knew when you sold your shares, my love, she wrote. You came home that day and you said, it's done, we're free. You thought I didn't understand. You thought I didn't know the numbers, but I always knew your value, Morgan. I knew you were a genius. And I knew you wanted to hide the money, to protect Alicia, to protect her from herself, from her own weaknesses. You thought you were protecting me too. By not telling me, you thought you were keeping me safe. I was openly crying now, just quiet, hot tears rolling down my cheeks. But I had to hide things too, Morgan, the letter continued. When Kyle Miller came into Alicia's life, my instincts screamed. It was all too perfect. He was too smooth. His family, the Millers, they were too interested. They didn't belong in our world, so why were they trying so hard to get in? I used some of my own savings, the money my mother left me. I did what you never would have thought to do. I hired a private investigator. Howard let out a low whistle. Good God, Serena. The investigator found everything, Morgan. The Millers had been watching us for years. They knew about your partnership. They knew about the sale. They ran your credit. They knew you were wealthy. They investigated Alicia. They learned about her debts, her insecurities, her desperate need for approval. They knew her weaknesses. And then they pushed Kyle to meet her. They set the entire trap. They weren't just happy she met a nice man, they orchestrated it. The full monstrous truth settled over me. It wasn't Kyle influencing Alicia. It was his entire family. A sophisticated generational plot to steal my life's work. Serena's letter finished with a plea that tore my heart out. They wanted him to marry our daughter Morgan. To marry her, gain her trust, and then through her steal your entire fortune. They have been planning this since before they even shook your hand. And our Alicia, our poor foolish girl, she is so blind. She is so desperate for the life they represent that she cannot see they are just using her as a key to open your vault. She is not a mastermind, Morgan. She is a pawn. Their pawn. I didn't tell you because you were finally retired. You were finally at peace. I was sick, and I didn't want this darkness to touch you. I tried to handle it. I tried to warn Alicia, but she wouldn't listen. She called me bitter. She called me jealous. So I started recording everything. I hid it all in the one place I knew she would one day sell if she got desperate enough. My necklace. The first gift you ever gave me. Use this evidence, Morgan, please. Do not let these vipers win. Do not let them take what we spent our lives building. This isn't just about the money. It's about our life, our legacy. Protect our legacy. Protect my memory. I love you always. Serena. The letter ended. I finally understood everything. I had been living in a simple, honest world while just outside my door, a family of predators had been patiently waiting, grooming my daughter, planning to strip me of everything I had. And my wife, my brave, brilliant Serena, had seen it all. She had fought them from the shadows right up until the very end. Lawyer, storage device. The words hung in the air of my old truck, thick and heavy like the Atlanta humidity. They didn't make sense. I'm a man who built bridges. I understand steel rebar and load-bearing walls. My world is solid. It's tangible. This was smoke. A nightmare. I looked at the tiny plastic evidence bag Russo had pressed into my hand. The micro SD card inside was smaller than my thumbnail. It looked like something from a spy movie, not something that belonged in my life. Who could I even call? My family was the enemy. Alicia and Kyle were on a plane to Cabo, laughing, spending the blood money they got for Serena's necklace. I had no one else. Wait, That wasn't true. I had Howard. My hand, still trembling, fumbled for my phone. I scrolled past Alicia's name, my thumb hesitating for just a second, a reflex of a lifetime of love. I forced myself to keep going, past the hardware store, past my doctor, until I found the name I hadn't needed to call in almost 6 months. Howard Jackson. I pressed the call button. My heart was a drum against my ribs. Howard and I went way back. We were the first 2 black engineers at Thompson Price Construction back in 1975, just 2 young men trying to build a career in a world that wasn't exactly rooting for us. We'd shared lunches in our trucks because the main break room always felt cold. He was the best man at my wedding. He held Serena's hand when she cried at her mother's funeral. He knew us. Then 20 years ago, Howard went back to school. He said he was tired of building things. He wanted to tear things down. He became a lawyer, a shark, the best damn shark in Atlanta. And he was the only man on earth I trusted. He picked up on the second ring. Morgan Price, to what do I owe the honor, old man? Don't tell me you finally decided to sue your neighbor for that ugly fence. His voice was warm, familiar. It almost broke me. Howard, I said, and my own voice cracked. It came out in a desperate whisper. Howard, I need help. I'm in trouble. The humor in his voice evaporated instantly. Morgan, you sound terrible. What's wrong? Where are you? The words just fell out of me. It sounded insane even to my own ears. Alicia. She stole Serena's necklace. The jade locket. She sold it. Howard. For a vacation to Cabo. She just left. That little... Howard started, but I cut him off. I went to the pawn shop. Russo's on Memorial. It was already sold. To a collector in New York. But Howard, the collector, he just called Russo. He said the locket opens. It opens? Yes. And Russo said the man found something inside. A storage device. A little black chip. And he said... My voice dropped. He said I should call a lawyer. Silence. For 5 full seconds, the only sound was the humming of my truck's old engine. Howard was processing. The friend was gone. The lawyer was in control. Morgan, he said, his voice now sharp, focused, cold as steel. Listen to me very carefully. Where are you right now? Exactly. I'm in my truck, parked across the street from Russo's. Do not move, he commanded. Do not go home. Do not under any circumstances call Alicia or Kyle. Do not talk to anyone. I am leaving my office downtown right now. I will be at your location in 15 minutes. Do you understand me? Yes, Howard. 15 minutes. Don't move. The line clicked dead. Howard was not a man who exaggerated. If he was this serious, then whatever Serena had hidden was more than just a secret. It was dangerous. True to his word, a sleek black sedan pulled up behind my truck 14 minutes later. Howard got out. He was 70, same as me, but he wore a $3,000 suit like it was a uniform. He looked sharp, powerful, and deeply worried. He didn't greet me. He just jerked his head toward the pawn shop. Let's go. We walked back inside. The little bell gave its sad jingle. Russo was behind the counter looking like he wished he'd never opened his shop today. Mr. Jackson, he said, nodding. He recognized Howard. Everyone in Atlanta with a serious problem knew Howard Jackson. Mr. Russo, Howard said, all business. My client is Morgan Price. You have come into possession of an item belonging to his late wife. I need all the information you have. Now. Russo looked relieved to be handing off the problem. Of course. The collector, a Mr. Eris. He's a specialist in antique mechanisms. He's the one who found the chip. Russo slid a piece of paper with a New York phone number across the counter. Howard took it. He didn't look at me. He just stepped onto the sidewalk, pulled out his own phone, and made the call. I watched him through the dusty shop window. I couldn't hear everything, just fragments. Mr. Eris, this is Howard Jackson. I am the attorney for Morgan Price, the husband of the late Serena Price. We understand you've acquired an item of hers. Howard went silent, listening. He was perfectly still. I watched him nod. I understand, he said. He listened again for a long, long time. I saw him rub his temple. Are you certain of that? He asked. Another long pause. He turned his back to me, looking out at the traffic, his shoulders tensed. He lowered his voice, and I couldn't hear anything for several minutes. He was just listening. Finally, I heard him say, "Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable." He took a deep breath. "Yes, we will pay for your discretion. And we will, of course, compensate you fully for the original item. We need that necklace back. And we need the original card." He gave Mr. Harris an email address. "Send the encrypted file to this address immediately. We will wire the funds." "Thank you. Thank you for your professionalism. You may have just saved a man's life." He hung up. He stood on the sidewalk for a full minute, not moving, just staring at the traffic. He seemed to be collecting himself. He fixed the cuff of his shirt, straightened his tie, and then walked back into the pawn shop, his face a grim mask. He looked at Russo. "Thank you for your cooperation. My client and I will take it from here. You will be compensated for your time. Do not speak of this to anyone, especially not to a young woman named Alicia or a man named Kyle Miller. Am I clear?" Russo just nodded, wide-eyed. "Crystal clear, Mr. Jackson." Howard put a hand on my shoulder. "Let's go, Morgan. We need to go to my office." We got into his immaculate luxury car. The quiet leather and silent engine were a different universe from my old truck. He didn't speak as he pulled into traffic. "Howard, for God's sake, what is it?" I finally burst out. "What did he say? What's on that chip?" Howard drove for another block, his eyes fixed on the road. He stopped at a red light and turned to me. His eyes were filled with a deep, profound sadness, a sadness I hadn't seen since the day we buried Serena. "Morgan," he said, his voice heavy. "The collector. He accessed the card. It's not just one file, it's hundreds, audio files. Dated, organized, and backed up." I was confused. "Audio of what? What are you talking about?" Howard took a slow, deep breath, and the next words he spoke changed my entire world. "For the last 10 years of her life, Morgan, Serena was secretly recording her phone calls." Howard and I sat there in the silence of his 40th floor office, the weight of Serena's last letter crushing me. My wife had been a warrior fighting a secret war I knew nothing about. She had been protecting me. She had been protecting our legacy. $18 million. Money I had hidden to protect my family, only to find out it had made us a target. And Alicia, my daughter. Not just a pawn as Serena had written, but a willing one. Howard finally spoke, his voice low and hard. "Morgan, we have everything. Conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, manipulation. This is enough to bury them. We can call the DA right now." I was about to nod. I was about to say, "Do it. Burn them to the ground." But just as I opened my mouth, my phone sitting on Howard's desk lit up and started to buzz. I looked at the screen. It was just a string of numbers. An international call. From Mexico. My heart hammered against my ribs. Cabo. I looked at Howard. He saw the name. He simply reached over and pressed the speaker button on his desk console. The call connected. Fake loud music and the sound of crashing waves instantly filled the quiet professional office. It was grotesque. "Dad!" Alicia's voice slurred through the speaker. She sounded drunk. Drunk on sunlight, drunk on tequila, and drunk on the $1,200 she got for selling her mother's memory. "How are you? Cabo is amazing. You would not believe the view from our room. It's just incredible." I said nothing. I just gripped the arms of my leather chair. I pictured Serena's jade locket sitting in a plastic bag in a collector's office in New York while my daughter partied. "Listen," she continued, her voice suddenly dripping with a fake, sticky sincerity. "I know you were, upset when we left. And Kyle and I, we've been talking. A lot. And I just feel terrible about that old necklace. Really, Dad. I do. It was a mistake. I was just so stressed." Howard and I locked eyes. His expression was pure ice. The performance was sickening. "So," Alicia chirped, "we decided, when we get back, we're going to buy you a brand new one, something even nicer, with a bigger stone. How does that sound? We can all just move on. A new one. As if you could replace 40 years of love. As if you could buy a replacement for a soul." She truly, deeply did not understand anything at all. Before I could find my voice, I heard fumbling on the other end of the line, the sound of a hand grabbing the phone, and then his voice. Kyle. He wasn't whispering anymore. He wasn't the smooth, predatory snake from Serena's recordings. His voice was loud. It was arrogant. It was impatient. He was done playing games. He thought he had won. "Morgan, listen to me." Kyle said, his voice sharp, like he was talking to a disobedient employee, not his father-in-law. "Alicia is right. This trip is amazing. And it's made us realize something. We've been letting you slide. We've been too gentle with your situation." Gentle, I gripped the chair so hard my knuckles turned white. Howard leaned forward, his eyes narrowed, listening to every word. "We're flying back Friday," Kyle continued. "And when we get back, we're having a real family meeting. I think it's time we get serious about your future, Morgan. This whole situation proves it." "My future?" I asked. I played the part he wanted. My voice was low, confused, the voice of the old man they believed me to be. "What are you talking about, Kyle?" "I'm talking about your care, Morgan," he said. "We've already been in touch with an excellent facility. It's called The Willows. Top of the line. They have gardens, medical staff on site 24/7. It's perfect for someone in your condition." "My condition," I repeated. The raw audacity of it, the cold-blooded efficiency was stunning. "Yes, your condition," Kyle said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. I could picture him lounging by a pool, sunglasses on, destroying my life between sips of a cocktail. "You're getting confused, Morgan. You're getting paranoid. You're losing things, important things, like Serena's necklace. You probably just misplaced it in one of your confused fits and then blamed poor Alicia. You don't even remember where you put it, do you?" My God. I looked at Howard. His face was pale. Kyle was using the very theft he orchestrated as the primary evidence to have me committed. He was using his crime as the proof of my incompetence. This was it. This was the exact plan Serena had recorded 3 years ago, now fully in motion. "It's time to sell that old house, Morgan," Kyle declared. His voice was flat final. "It's too much for you. It's unsafe. Alicia and I will handle the sale. We'll handle everything. From now on, you don't have to worry your confused old head about a single thing. It's time to let your daughter, your real family, take care of you." He hung up. He didn't even say goodbye. He just clicked off the line. The silence in Howard's office was heavier than a concrete block. They weren't just thieves. They weren't just liars. They were executioners. And they had just proudly, arrogantly handed me their entire detailed, monstrous plan. They were coming back Friday. They thought they were coming back to check me into a nursing home and claim their prize. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The speakerphone clicked off. The office was quiet again, but the air crackled. Kyle's arrogant, dismissive voice was still hanging in the air. "It's time to let your real family take care of you." I looked at Howard. He was just staring at the phone console, his face unreadable. "Howard," I said, my voice low. He just handed us his entire plan, on a silver platter." Howard slowly leaned back in his chair. He looked at me, and for the first time in an hour, I saw a smile. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator that has just cornered its prey. "Yes, he did," Howard said. "They think you're confused, Morgan. They think you're poor. They think you're alone. They have absolutely no idea what's on this computer. They don't know that Serena is still fighting them from the grave." A new kind of energy filled me. The grief was still there, a heavy stone in my gut, but now it was surrounded by a cold, hard rage, a structural rage. I wasn't just a grieving husband anymore. I was an engineer, and I had just found the critical flaw in their design. "They think I'm confused," I repeated, tasting the word. "They think I'm forgetful." "They're counting on it," Howard said. "They're counting on you being a broken old man who will just roll over and sign his life away." I stood up. I walked to the window of Howard's office. I looked down 40 stories at the city I helped build. I built the foundations for half those skyscrapers. I know how to make things stand, and I know how to make them fall. "They want a broken old man," I said, turning back to Howard. "They want a confused, scared victim." Howard just watched me waiting. "Then that's exactly what we're going to give them." Howard's smile widened. "Now you're talking, Morgan. What's the play?" "They're coming back Friday. They're coming with papers to put me in a home and sell my house. They're coming to finish the job." And what are we going to do? We're going to be ready. But we can't just get Kyle and Alicia. We need the head of the snake. We need the Millers. We need Barbara and Richard in that room. I want to see their faces when they realize Serena beat them. They won't come just for a simple signing, Howard warned. They're rich. They send people like Kyle to do their dirty work. Oh, they'll come, I said. They'll come if they think I'm insisting on it. If they think their confused old friend is having a moment of clarity and needs them there for comfort. They won't be able to resist being in the room to witness their final victory. I picked up my phone. Get your recorders ready, Howard. I'm going to make the call. It's time to give the performance of my life. I sat back down. I took a deep breath, letting the image of Serena's empty jewelry box fill my mind. I let the rage and the grief churn inside me. I needed to sound broken. I needed to sound terrified. I hit redial. The phone rang once, twice. Kyle picked up. "Morgan," he answered. His voice was sharp, surprised I'd called back so soon. "What is it now? I told you we'll see you Friday." I didn't answer right away. I let out a shaky breath. I made a small sound, a half sob. "Kyle," I whispered. "What? Speak up, Morgan." "Kyle, I'm scared," I stammered. I hated the sound of my own voice, so weak, so pathetic, but it was necessary. "What are you scared of now?" He sighed, annoyed. I think you're right," I whispered. "What you said. About the necklace. I can't find my keys now. I just had them, and now they're gone. I think I left the stove on again this morning. I don't remember." I heard him muffle the phone. I could hear him whispering to Alicia. "It's working. He's falling apart. He's talking about the stove." He came back on the line, his voice suddenly smooth, dripping with fake sympathy. Hey, Morgan, it's okay. See, this is what we were talking about. This is exactly why we need to help you. You're just tired." "I am," I cried, letting the tears I felt for Serena finally come. "I'm so tired, and I'm so lonely. You're right. I'm confused. I don't remember anything anymore." "It's okay, Morgan," Kyle said, his voice like poison honey. "We're coming home. We'll handle everything. You just rest." "No, don't wait," I said, putting panic in my voice. "I want to do it now. I can't be alone, please. The house, the papers, what you said about the Willows. I'll do it. I'll sign everything. I don't want to be alone." There was a sharp intake of breath on his end. He couldn't believe his luck. He was closing the deal faster than he thought. "Okay, Morgan," he said. "Okay, that's a very smart decision. We'll cancel the rest of the trip. We'll be home tomorrow." "No, Friday is fine," I said. But Kyle, I need to ask you something." "Anything, Morgan. Anything." "Your parents," I said, my voice trembling. "Richard and Barbara, they've always been such good friends to me and Serena. So kind. They're good people. Not like me." "They sure are, Morgan. When I signed the papers, the power of attorney, could they be there?" I asked, playing my final card. I trust them. I trust their advice. If they are there telling me it's the right thing to do, then I'll know it's okay. I'd feel safer if they were in the room. Please. As witnesses." I heard him muffle the phone again. He was definitely talking to his mother. I heard faint, excited whispering. He came back on the line, barely able to contain the triumph in his voice. "Morgan, that's a wonderful idea," he said. "Of course. My parents would be honored to be there for you during this transition. They'll be there to help. We all will." "Thank you, Kyle," I whispered. "Thank you. You're a good son. A good son." "You're doing the right thing, Morgan. We'll see you Friday, 10 a.m., at your lawyer's office." "My lawyer, Don't you worry about a thing," Kyle said smoothly. "I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers and meet us there. It's all taken care of." "No," I said with a flash of what he would think was confused panic. "No, I want my lawyer, Howard Jackson. I trust Howard." There was a slight hesitation. This was a deviation. "Fine," Kyle said, clearly deciding it didn't matter whose office it was. "A signature is a signature. 10 a.m., Friday. At Howard Jackson's office. We'll bring the papers, and my parents will be there. Just be ready to sign, Morgan. I will, I whispered. Thank you. I hung up the phone. I looked at Howard. His face was a mixture of disgust and admiration. Morgan Price, he said, shaking his head. You missed your calling. You should have been an actor. I wiped the fake tears from my face. The cold rage was back. The hook is set, Howard. They're all coming. The sharks are swimming right into the boat. Howard stood up and straightened his tie. Then we'd better get the boat ready. We have 48 hours to prepare for a family reunion. It was Friday, 10 a.m. Howard had insisted we use the main conference room, the one on the 40th floor. It was a room designed to intimidate, a 20-foot-long single-slab mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling glass windows that looked down on all of Atlanta. I wanted this. I wanted them to feel powerful. I wanted them to feel like they were in their world, not mine. Howard wasn't in the room. He was in his main office watching everything on a small hidden camera feed. Keisha, his sharpest paralegal, sat at the far end of the table pretending to be the notary. She had a stack of our documents hidden and her own recorder running. I was in my costume, my oldest pair of khaki pants, the ones with a small paint stain on the knee, a plaid short-sleeve shirt washed so many times it was soft and faded, the shoes I wear to cut the grass. I hadn't slept, but that only helped the act. The dark circles under my eyes were genuine. I slumped in the massive leather chair at the head of the table. I looked small, defeated. I stared out the window, pretending to be lost in a fog of confusion. The heavy glass doors opened. In they walked. It was a procession, a victory parade. Alicia and Kyle came first. They looked like they'd just stepped out of a magazine. Kyle wore a slick, shiny gray suit, no tie. He looked like a wolf who had just been handed the keys to the henhouse. Alicia was in a bright red dress, her hair perfect, her makeup thick. She was vibrating with excitement, a smile so wide it looked like it hurt her face. She was practically glowing with greed. Behind them were the real monsters. Richard and Barbara Miller. Richard, Kyle's father, was tall, imposing in a dark pinstripe suit that probably cost more than my truck. He gave me a short, dismissive nod as if I were a piece of furniture that came with the room. He immediately walked to the window, looking down at the city as if he were already deciding what to buy first. But Barbara was the true artist. She glided across the room, her face a perfect, tragic mask of loving concern. She was wearing pearls. She smelled like a flower shop, an expensive, choking scent that filled the air. She rushed to my side, ignoring Keisha completely. She put her cold, manicured hands on my shoulders. "Oh, Morgan," she breathed. Her voice was velvet and poison. "We are so glad you're accepting this help. We were all so worried. This is the right thing to do, Morgan. It's the brave thing to do. Alicia and Kyle, they just love you so much." I blinked slowly. I made my eyes look watery, unfocused. I looked up at her like a child looking for reassurance. "Barbara," I whispered. "You came. Thank you. Thank you. I just want this all to be over. I'm so tired." "We know, dear," she cooed, patting my shoulder before pulling back. "And it will be. Very soon." Kyle couldn't stand the sentiment. He was all business. He dropped a thick leather briefcase onto the mahogany table. The thud echoed in the silent room. "And it will be Morgan. Soon," he said. He looked at Keisha. "You're the notary." Keisha, a brilliant actress herself, just nodded. "I am." "Good," Kyle said. He snapped open the briefcase. "Let's get this done. We have a lot to do today. We have an appointment at the Willows at 2. He pulled out a thick stack of documents. Not just 1 or 2 pages. A stack. He slid them across the polished table, stopping them right in front of me. "All right, Morgan," he said. He tapped the first page with his expensive pen. "It's all very simple. Standard procedure." His voice was loud, patronizing, like he was explaining it to a child. This is the full power of attorney. Durable. Medical and financial." He savored those words. "This gives Alicia, your loving daughter, the full legal authority to manage your affairs, your finances, your medical decisions, everything, so you don't have to worry your confused old head about it anymore." I looked at the paper. It was a dense sea of legal text. I squinted, pretending to try to read it. It's so many words, Kyle. I don't understand." "You don't need to understand, Morgan," Richard Miller said from the window. His deep voice cut through the room. He didn't even turn around to look at me. That's the whole point. It's for the best. A man in your condition shouldn't be handling complex finances. It's a burden. This document simply lifts that burden. Kyle was already moving on. He tapped the second stack of papers. And this, he said, is the sales contract. For the house. My house. We've taken care of everything, he continued, smiling. You don't have to worry about listings or agents or showings. We found a private buyer, a corporation. They're ready to close immediately. Richard Miller finally turned around. He walked over to the table, looming over me. That's right, Morgan. A holding company I have some dealings with. They're prepared to offer $650,000, cash. My insides went cold. $650,000 for my house, the house I built. The land alone in this market was worth more than that. They weren't just stealing it, they were stealing it for pennies on the dollar. It's a very generous price, Morgan. Richard continued, his eyes flat and cold. Very generous, considering the neighborhood. It's a quick, clean sale. No fuss, no stress for you. He smiled. The money will go directly into a new joint account that Kyle and Alicia will manage to pay for your care at the Willows. They had thought of everything. A fraudulent rushed power of attorney to give them control. A fraudulent, criminally undervalued sale of my home to a shell company run by Kyle's father. And a plan to deposit the stolen money into an account they and only they controlled. All wrapped in the lie of taking care of me. I looked at all of them. Alicia beaming, her hand resting on Kyle's arm. Kyle looking like a king on his throne. Barbara smiling that gentle, false smile of concern. Richard looking impatient, checking his watch. They were a pack of jackals, and they were closing in for the kill. I reached for the pen. I made my hand shake. I made it look like the pen weighed 1,000 pounds. I fumbled as I picked it up. I looked up, my eyes watery. I played the part of the confused, grateful, beaten old fool. Thank you, I whispered. My voice was thick, choked. Thank you all for being here, for helping me. I don't know what I'd do without my family. Kyle smirked, that arrogant, triumphant smirk. Just sign on the dotted line, Morgan. We'll take it from here. I picked up the pen. I lowered it toward the paper. I could feel all four of them leaning in. They were holding their breath. They were just one single signature away from $18 million. I could almost smell their greed. The pen touched the paper. I held the pen. My hand was shaking. It was the performance of a lifetime. I looked at the dotted line on the first page, the power of attorney. I could feel all four of them leaning in, almost vibrating with anticipation. They were holding their breath. This was it. The culmination of their years of planning. The single signature that would erase me, institutionalize me, and make them rich. I took one last watery look up at Alicia. For you, baby, I whispered. I touched the pen to the paper. I would not do that if I were you, Morgan. The voice was deep. It was powerful. It boomed from the back of the room, cutting through the thick, greedy silence like a thunderclap. The heavy glass doors of the conference room slid open. Howard Jackson walked in. He wasn't dressed like a man coming to a simple signing. He was dressed like a warrior. He wore a perfectly tailored dark blue suit, a crisp white shirt, and a look of cold, righteous fury. He did not look at the Millers. He did not look at Alicia. He looked right at me. "Step away from the table, Morgan," he said. Kyle was the first to react. He shot up from his chair, his face instantly turning a splotchy, ugly red. The mask of the caring son-in-law evaporated. "Who the hell are you?" he snapped. "And who gave you permission to interrupt this meeting? This is a private family matter." Richard Miller crossed his arms, his eyes narrowing to slits. Barbara's perfect, compassionate smile twitched. Alicia just looked confused, her head tilting. "Dad, who is this?" Howard walked slowly, his expensive shoes making no sound on the thick carpet. He walked deliberately until he stood right next to me. He placed a heavy grounding hand on my shoulder, and I could feel the strength in it. He looked directly at Kyle. "My name is Howard Jackson," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "I am Mr. Price's personal counsel. I have been for 30 years. He gestured dismissively at the stack of papers on the table. "And this is not a family matter. This is a conspiracy to commit felony fraud." The word fraud hung in the air. Kyle laughed. It was a short, nervous barking sound. "Fraud? What are you talking about? This is a simple power of attorney. Morgan asked us to be here. He asked for our help. He's confused." "He is confused," Howard replied, raising one eyebrow. "Is that the story you're going with? That he's confused?" Barbara Miller stepped forward, gliding, her velvet voice returning. "Sir, I don't know who you are, but you are clearly upsetting him. Morgan is a dear, dear friend. We are just here to support his family's decision." "You're right about one thing, Mrs. Miller," Howard said, turning his cold gaze on her. "You are going to support his family's decision, just not in the way you think." Howard turned to Keisha, the paralegal at the end of the table, who had been silent this whole time. "Keisha, please dim the lights and bring up the first file, Exhibit A." "What is this?" "We're not in a courtroom," Richard Miller boomed, his voice echoing. He was a man who was used to being in charge, and he could feel control slipping from his fingers. "We are not," Howard agreed pleasantly, "but we are documenting this meeting for the actual legal proceedings that will follow." The overhead lights dimmed. The massive 80-inch television screen on the wall, which had been showing a serene screensaver of the Atlanta skyline, flickered to life. It showed a simple audio file icon. "What is this nonsense?" Kyle demanded, his voice a little too high. "Let's call it a recording from 3 years ago," Howard said. He pressed play, and then the room was filled with Kyle's own voice. "You don't ask, baby. You don't ask for things you are already entitled to. We just need to speed up the process." Alicia let out a small, strangled gasp. Her hand flew to her mouth. Kyle froze, his face draining of all color. He went from red to a sickly pale white. The recording continued, filling the shocked silence. Alicia's voice whining. "What does that mean? He'll probably live another 20 years. And Kyle's smooth, patient, poisonous reply. "I'm not talking about physically, baby. I'm talking mentally. He's an old man. He lives all alone. He's forgetful. We just need to help him realize it." Barbara Miller's eyes were wide with horror. Not horror at the plan, horror that it had been recorded. The audio kept playing, laying out the entire sickening strategy. You find his keys in the refrigerator after you put them there. You accidentally turn off the stove. You plant the seed. We get him to sign over power of attorney. And then, baby, we don't have to ask for anything ever again. Howard stopped the recording. The silence in the room was so loud it hurt my ears. Alicia was trembling, staring at Kyle. You recorded us," she whispered, completely missing the point. "I didn't record you, Alicia," I said. It was the first time I had spoken in my real voice, the strong, clear, steady voice of Morgan Price, the voice of an engineer, the voice of a man who was no longer acting. They all turned to me. The confused old man was gone. I was sitting up straight in my chair. The fog was gone from my eyes. The tremble was gone from my hands. "Your mother recorded you," I said. Alicia's face crumpled. "What? Serena recorded you?" Howard clarified, his voice sharp as a razor. "For the last 10 years of her life, she knew exactly who you were. She knew exactly what you were planning, and she left this for her husband. She left him everything." Kyle looked like he was going to be sick. He was looking at me, then at the screen, then at his parents. The trap was closing, and he could feel the teeth. This is inadmissible," Richard Miller blustered, falling back on legal terms he'd probably heard on television. "You can't record people without their consent." "Oh, but you can, Mr. Miller," Howard said with a thin, cold smile. "In the state of Georgia, you absolutely can. It's a one-party consent state. And Serena was a party to every single lie you and your family told her. But this recording of your son and his wife, this is just the appetizer." Howard gestured to the papers on the table. "Let's talk about this generous offer for my client's home. $650,000. Richard Miller puffed out his chest, trying to regain his footing. "It's a fair market price, more than fair considering the location." "That's a lie," Howard said flatly. "I ran the comps this morning. That property with the land it's on is worth $1.2 million, minimum." "That's just your opinion," Richard shot back. "Is it?" Howard smiled again. "Because I also ran a corporate search on your private buyer, this holding company you found. He pressed another button. A new document filled the screen, a corporate filing from the state of Delaware. "The sole proprietor," Howard announced to the room, "is Mr. Richard Miller. You weren't finding a buyer for Morgan. You were trying to steal his house for half its value using his own daughter as a pawn and laundering the money through a shell company you own." Richard Miller's face was a dark purplish color. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You set us up. You tricked us." I stood up from my chair. I was no longer the small, confused old man. I was Morgan Price, and I was in my element. "No, Richard," I said, my voice echoing in the silent, expensive room. "I didn't set you up. You've been setting yourselves up for 10 years. I just let you finish the job." Barbara Miller's face was the picture of offended dignity. She glided forward, her expensive perfume preceding her, a cloud of arrogance and entitlement. She placed a hand on her husband's arm. "Richard, darling, calm down. Can't you see what this is? This lawyer has clearly taken advantage of a grieving, confused old man. He's agitated him. He's put these ridiculous ideas into his head." She turned that bright false smile on me. It was the same smile she had used when she first walked in, but now it was strained, brittle. "Morgan," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Morgan, look at what he's done to you. You are overwrought. You're not yourself. We are your friends. We are your family. We are only here to help." Howard Jackson let her finish. He let the word help hang in the air for a 3 count. It was long enough for the word to curdle, to sour, to become an obscenity in the sterile, silent room. "Help," Howard repeated. His voice was soft, dangerously quiet. "That's an interesting choice of words, Mrs. Miller." He looked at her. He truly looked at her, and I saw her polished facade flicker, the smile twitching at the corners. "You are right," Howard continued. "You have been helping for a very long time. In fact, you were helping just 6 months ago, right after Serena Price's funeral. Weren't you?" Kyle, who had been frozen, finally found his voice. What are you talking about?" We were supporting Alicia. She was grieving." "Were you?" Howard said, turning his cold gaze back to the massive screen at the end of the room. "Keisha, Exhibit B, if you please. This one is titled, 'The Miller Plan.'" The screen changed. Another audio file icon appeared. "I will not stand here and listen to this slander," Richard Miller boomed, taking a half-step toward the desk, his hand raised as if to command the room. "I would advise you to stay exactly where you are, Mr. Miller," Howard said. His voice didn't get louder, but it dropped an octave, gaining the steel I knew so well. "Because this recording is between your wife and your son, and it is fascinating." He pressed play on his remote. The room filled with Kyle's voice. It wasn't the smooth, predatory voice from the first recording. This was the voice of an annoyed subordinate, a man taking orders. "I'm working on it, Mother. I'm telling you, the girl is difficult. She's lazy. She just wants the money without doing the work." Alicia's head, which had been bowed in confusion, snapped up. She stared at Kyle. "The girl," she whispered, but her question was steamrolled by the next voice, Barbara Miller's voice, cold, hard, uncompromising. "I am not interested in your complaints, Kyle. I am interested in results. Have you convinced that foolish girl to get control of Morgan Price's assets or not?" Alicia made a small choking sound. "Foolish girl," Kyle's voice on the recording was whining. "But are you sure it's worth this much effort? Why are we so focused on this one old retired engineer? He lives in a dump in southwest Atlanta. What could he possibly have?" And then I heard it, a sound that will haunt me for the rest of my days. Barbara Miller's laugh. It was not a pleasant sound. It was cold, sharp, and utterly devoid of humor. "You really are an idiot, Kyle. You have your father's looks, but none of his brains. You think Morgan Price is just some old engineer? You think he just worked at Thompson Price Construction?" The conference room was absolutely silent. Everyone was frozen. Even Richard Miller was staring at the screen, his mouth slightly open, his bluster gone. Barbara's recorded voice continued a ruthless monologue, spelling out my entire life, my entire secret. Morgan Price wasn't just at the company, he was a founding partner. Thompson was the face, but Price was the brains. He was the structural genius. I watched Barbara's real face. The mask of compassion had shattered. She was staring at the screen, her eyes wide with a mixture of pure animal rage and abject terror. She looked like a snake cornered. When he retired 2 years ago, her voice echoed through the room. He sold his shares back to the firm. We had our contacts run the numbers. Do you know what he sold his 49% stake for, Kyle? Kyle's recorded voice, $1.2 million. Barbara's voice, $18 million. He's been hiding it. He lives like a pauper, but he is loaded. He is sitting on a fortune and he has one heir. That's it, his only daughter, Alicia. Your stupid, naive little wife. She is the key to all of it. Alicia let out a sound. It was not a word. It was a high-pitched, wounded, strangled noise. She was staring at her husband, Kyle, but he wasn't looking at her. He was staring at his mother, his face a mask of pure betrayal. He had been played too. The recording was not finished. You get that girl to have her father declared incompetent, Barbara commanded. You get her to sign over power of attorney to you before she ever realizes how much is really there. You secure the assets, we move him into a home, and the Price fortune, my dear, becomes the Miller fortune. Now stop failing me and get it done. Howard stopped the file. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. It was the sound of 4 lives disintegrating in real time. All eyes in the room, mine, Howard's, Keisha's, even the Millers', all of them turned to Alicia. She was trembling. Her entire body was shaking so violently I thought she might collapse. She was pale, deathly pale. She turned very slowly, her movements stiff and robotic, to look at her husband. Her voice was a dry, cracked whisper. 18 million. Kyle didn't answer. He was still staring at his mother, his face a mask of pure white-hot hatred. You told me he had maybe 1 or 2 million locked in the house, he hissed at Barbara. You've been playing me. You were going to cut me out. Richard Miller finally found his voice, low and dangerous. Barbara, what is this? But Alicia wasn't listening to them. Her entire universe had just compressed down to one single horrifying point. Her husband, the man she had betrayed her father for. Kyle, she said, her voice a little louder, desperate pleading. A plan. You used me. She looked at him, her eyes wide, begging him to deny it, begging him for one more lie, one more performance. She needed him to say it wasn't true, but Kyle had lost. He had been exposed by his dead mother-in-law. He had been manipulated by his own mother. He was trapped in a room with a lawyer who had him dead to rights. He had nothing left to lose. The mask of the charming patient husband didn't just crack, it exploded. He turned to Alicia, and he laughed. It was not the smooth, charming laugh from Serena's first recording. It was a real ugly, bitter laugh that came from the depths of his rotten soul. Used you, he spat, his voice dripping with 3 years of pent-up resentment. Used you, I endured you, Alicia. I endured you for 3 solid years. Alicia flinched as if he had physically slapped her. What? I endured your whining. He shouted, his face turning that ugly, splotchy red I had seen earlier. I endured your constant need for approval, your stupid, endless daddy issues. I endured your fake, empty-headed friends. I sat through those horrible, greasy barbecues in that disgusting backyard, listening to your father's boring stories about concrete. No, Alicia whispered, shaking her head, the tears finally starting to well. No, you love me. Love you, he roared. The sound was so loud it seemed to rattle the glass walls. You thought this was real. You thought a guy like me from my family would ever seriously end up with someone like you. You were a job, Alicia. That's all you ever were. A stupid, naive, broke pawn in a game you weren't even smart enough to see. No, no, no. You were the key, Kyle screamed, jabbing his finger at her. You were the key to the vault, the key to the 18 million. And you were too stupid to even know the vault existed. I was supposed to cash out. I was supposed to be done with you. You were just a means to an end. Alicia just stared at him. Her face was completely blank. The tears had stopped. The shaking had stopped. All the life had just drained out of her. She had just been told that her entire marriage, her entire identity, her entire worth was a lie. Kyle wasn't finished. He pointed a shaking finger at her. And you couldn't even do that right. You got impatient. You got greedy for $1,200 measly dollars. You sold the one thing that could have warned us. You sold the spy device. You are the most useless, stupid. He never finished the sentence. Alicia didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She screamed. It was not a human sound. It was a primal animal sound of pure, undiluted rage. It came from the bottom of her soul. You liar! She launched herself across the small space separating them. It was not a slap. It was an attack. She flew at him, nails first, aiming for his eyes. She grabbed the lapels of his $1,000 suit jacket, ripping the fabric. She clawed at his face. "I hate you!" she shrieked. Kyle yelped, surprised by the violence, grabbing her wrists as she fought him. "Get off me, you crazy!" "You used me! You used me!" Alicia screamed, kicking his shins, fighting like a cornered animal. "Richard, do something!" Barbara shrieked, finally snapping out of her stunned silence. Richard Miller lunged forward and grabbed Alicia from behind, yanking her back in a rough bear hug. "Get your hands off my daughter!" I roared, standing up so fast my chair nearly fell over. "Security," Keisha the paralegal spoke calmly and clearly into the intercom on the table. "Security to conference room 1. Immediately." The room exploded into chaos. Alicia was sobbing and fighting against Richard's grip. Kyle was touching his face, looking at the blood on his fingertips from the scratches. Barbara was yelling at everyone, at me, at Howard, at Alicia. And Howard and I, we just stood there. We stood there and watched the empire eat itself. Security burst into the room. 2 large men in professional black suits, their faces grim. They didn't run, they moved with a quick, heavy, practiced efficiency. "Everyone calm down now," one of them commanded, his voice a low rumble that demanded obedience. Richard Miller, a man clearly unaccustomed to being told what to do by anyone, shoved Alicia away from him. He did it with a grunt of pure disgust. "Get this hysterical woman off me," he spat. Alicia stumbled backward, her sobs now turning into desperate, gasping breaths. She collapsed against one of the leather conference chairs. Kyle was leaning against the far wall, dabbing at a long, bright red scratch on his cheek with a silk pocket square. He wasn't looking at Alicia. He was staring at his mother, his face a mask of pure, murderous loathing. Richard Miller, his expensive pinstripe suit rumpled his face, a dark, blotchy purple turned his rage from Alicia to the only person left he could blame. Me. He jabbed a thick, shaking finger across the mahogany table. "Enough!" he roared, his voice cracking with uncontrolled fury. "This is a farce, you. You did this. I didn't flinch. I just stood by my chair, my hands resting on the back. I did what Richard, I played a recording. It was your wife's voice. It was your son's voice." "You tricked us," he yelled, his composure completely gone. "You set this whole thing up. You deceitful old fraud, sitting on $18 million pretending to be some poor, pathetic old man in a shack. You lied. You hid that money." He took a gasping breath, and in his rage, the final fatal confession spilled out. "That money should have been ours." The room went completely still. The security guards paused. Alicia's sobbing hitched in her throat. Even Kyle looked up, a flicker of dark amusement in his dead eyes. They all heard it. He didn't say it should have been Alicia's. He said ours, the Millers, the final damning admission. Howard and I locked eyes for a brief second. We got him. I finally stood up straight, letting go of the back of the chair. The performance was over. The shaking, confused old man was gone. The engineer, the man who built foundations, the man who understood structural integrity and recognized its complete absence in the people before him, was here. "You are right about one thing, Richard," I said. My voice was no longer the frail whisper I had been using. It was clear. It was steady. It was cold. It cut through the silence of the 40th floor room. I did hide the money. I looked at him, at his apoplectic face. I looked at Barbara, who was staring at me. Her face pale, her mask of civility completely gone. She was a cornered animal. "I hid it," I continued, "precisely because I knew people like you existed. I hid it to protect my family from the rot that money brings. I hid it to protect my daughter from men who would see her as a price tag, not a person. I hid it to protect my legacy from predators who mistake simple living for stupidity, who mistake humility for weakness. I hid it from vipers like you." Barbara stammered, You can't—" "Yes, me," I said. "The confused old man, the pauper, the burden. I let you all walk right into this room in your expensive suits and lay your entire criminal conspiracy on this table. You thought you were coming here to shear a sheep. You didn't realize you were walking into a slaughterhouse." I looked away from the Millers. Their part in this was over. They were just criminals waiting for a sentence. My gaze fell on Alicia. She was on the floor, huddled by the chair, her bright red designer dress bunched up around her. She was weeping, not with rage anymore, but with a deep, broken, agonizing despair. She had lost her father, her husband, her real family, the Millers, and her fantasy of $18 million, all in the span of 10 minutes. I walked over to her. I didn't tower over her. I just stood a few feet away. The security guards watched me, but I ignored them. "Alicia," I said. My voice was softer now. Not with forgiveness, but with finality. She looked up at me, her face a ruin of smeared mascara and tears. You knew," she whispered, her voice raw. "You knew they were lying to me. You knew they were just using me." "I knew," I said, "but I didn't know how deep it went. Not until you helped me." Her head snapped up, her expression baffled. I didn't help you," she sobbed. "I hate you. I stole from you." "Yes, you did," I said, and the coldness returned to my voice. "You stole the one thing on this earth I truly valued. You stole the last piece of your mother." I just wanted a vacation," she wailed. "I just wanted $1,200. "I know," I said, "and I need to thank you for that." She looked up completely confused. Her sobbing hitched. "Thank me?" "Yes, Alicia, thank you. Thank you for being so greedy, so petty, and so desperate for $1,200 that you sold your mother's necklace. Because you see that necklace? That was Serena's last gift to me." I pointed to the dark screen on the wall. "These recordings, this entire case, the reason these people," I gestured to the Millers, "are about to go to prison. It didn't come from a bank. It didn't come from an investigator. It came from inside the locket." Alicia's eyes went wide. She stopped crying. She was just staring. "Your mother knew exactly who they were, Alicia," I said, my voice dropping. "She saw this all coming. She knew they were grooming you. She knew they were predators. She knew she was dying, and she knew that one day your greed would make you betray her. She counted on it." Kyle, hearing this, let out a strangled groan from the wall. A spy device. A micro SD card. Howard Jackson said, stepping forward, his voice filling the room. "Hidden inside the jade. Serena Price recorded everything for the last 10 years of her life. Every phone call, every threat, every whisper of this conspiracy." I looked back down at Alicia. Her face was no longer pale. It was gray, the color of ash. "Your mother knew you, Alicia," I said. "She knew you'd never value the locket for its sentiment. She knew you'd only see it as cash. So she turned her most precious memory into a time bomb, a truth vault. She knew that the only way to save my life was to wait for you to betray her death. She put all this evidence, all this proof, inside that necklace. And you, Alicia." I let the words hang in the air, letting her feel the full weight of her actions. "In your desperate, blind need for a vacation, you sold it. You sold the very key that locked your husband's prison cell. You sold the evidence that just destroyed his entire family." Alicia made a sound, a long, low wail that came from the bottom of her soul. It was the sound of a life breaking in half. She finally truly understood. She had been the instrument of her own destruction. The $1,200 wasn't just blood money, it was the price of her entire life. She realized that her mother, the woman she had dismissed, had outsmarted them all from beyond the grave. She collapsed completely, just a sobbing heap in a red dress on the floor of a 40th-story conference room, utterly and completely alone. The security guards had them separated. Kyle was pressed against the glass wall, breathing hard, the red scratches on his cheek already beating with blood. Alicia was a sobbing, hysterical mess on the floor, held back by the other guard. Richard Miller was furiously trying to straighten his expensive pinstripe suit, his face a dark, dangerous purple. Barbara was frozen by the table, her hand half raised, her mask of polite society shattered, revealing the shocked, ugly greed beneath. Richard Miller, a man clearly unaccustomed to being told no, pointed a thick, shaking finger at me. "This is an outrage," he boomed, his voice cracking with rage. This meeting is over. We are leaving. We will be filing harassment charges against you, Jackson, and you, Morgan, for this ambush. Howard didn't even look at him. He just looked past Richard toward the main conference room doors. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. The heavy glass doors slid open again. This time it wasn't just the building's security. 2 men and 1 woman in dark professional suits walked in. They didn't run. They didn't raise their voices. They moved with a heavy, deliberate authority that filled the room and sucked all the air out of it. They held small, open badges in their hands. "What now?" Kyle spat from the wall. "More of the old man's hired goons." "These aren't my goons, Mr. Miller," Howard said, his voice cold and final. "These are detectives from the Atlanta Police Department's Financial Crimes Division." The chaos stopped. The yelling, the crying, the blustering, it all just stopped. Barbara Miller took a tiny, involuntary step backward, her hand flying to her pearl necklace. Richard's arrogant posture froze. Howard Jackson picked up a document from Keisha's desk. "Richard Miller, Barbara Miller, and Kyle Miller," he announced, his voice carrying across the now tomb-like silence of the conference room. "You are all being placed under arrest." "On what charges?" Richard blustered, but the power in his voice was gone. It was a weak, paper-thin threat. "Let's start the list, shall we?" Howard said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. This was for Serena. Conspiracy to commit felony fraud, wire fraud in relation to a shell corporation registered in the state of Delaware, attempted elder abuse, and... He paused, letting the word land. "Extortion, based on recordings made by the late Serena Price detailing your efforts to conceal a crime from her 10 years ago in exchange for her silence." The detectives moved. It was fast, professional. One officer approached Richard Miller. "Sir, please put your hands behind your back." Richard just stared at him, his face gray. He looked old. He looked defeated. Barbara let out a high-pitched squeal. "You can't do this. Do you have any idea who we are? You are suspects in a felony investigation, ma'am," the female detective said, her voice flat and bored. She expertly cuffed Barbara's thin, manicured wrists behind her back. "You have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use it." But Kyle still had fight in him. He was a cornered rat, and he was going to bite. As the detective pulled his arms behind him, Kyle twisted his face, a mask of pure, undiluted hatred. He wasn't looking at his parents. He was looking at me. "This isn't over, old man," he screamed, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "You think you've won. You think you're so smart. You'll never see a dime of that 18 million. We'll fight this. We'll tie you up in court until you die. You will never see a penny of it. You'll die in that shack alone." I just looked at him. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. He still thought this was about the money. He still didn't understand. He never would. "Let's go," the detective said, pushing him firmly toward the door. "You can tell your lawyer all about it." They were led out, a pathetic parade of failed ambition, the most powerful family in Buckhead undone by a jade locket and a dead woman's love. The glass doors slid shut. The Millers were gone. The security guards left with them. The conference room was suddenly shockingly quiet. The only sound in the entire 40th floor office was the high, thin, racking sobs coming from the floor. Alicia. She was still there, curled in a ball by the chair. She was a piece of wreckage left behind by the storm. The detectives hadn't touched her. She was a ruin in a bright red dress. I looked at her. My daughter. The girl I had raised. The foolish girl Serena had tried to protect. The stupid, naive pawn Kyle had just admitted to using. She had lost her father, her husband, her real family, her fantasy of $18 million, and her entire life, all in the span of 10 minutes. I felt nothing. Not victory, not pity, just a vast, cold emptiness. The 2 remaining detectives looked at her. Then they looked at Howard. Then they looked at me. They were waiting. Alicia finally looked up. Her face was a ruin. The makeup was streaked. Her eyes were red and swollen. She was just a 38-year-old woman, lost and terrified. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Howard. What happens to me now?" she whispered, her voice raw from screaming and crying. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. This wasn't my decision to make. This was Serena's justice. I looked at Howard. I gave him one single slow nod. Finish it. Howard sighed. It was a deep, heavy sigh, the only sign of emotion he had shown. This was the part he hated. This was the part that was just pure tragedy. He walked over to her. He didn't loom. He crouched down slowly so he was almost at her level. Alicia, he said, and his voice was gentle now but firm as granite. Alicia Price, you are also under arrest. What? For what? She sobbed, shrinking back. I didn't know about the 18 million. I swear I didn't. He used me. I'm a victim too. He lied to me. That may be true, Howard said softly. And you will have plenty of time to tell your side of that story. That's why you are being charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and not the primary fraud charge. But you did know you were participating in a plan to have your father declared incompetent. You did know you were trying to sell his house out from under him for a fraction of its value. And he paused, his voice hardening just a fraction. You did commit felony theft. You stole your mother's necklace, Alicia. You sold it for cash. That is a crime. And that crime is what brought this whole house of cards down on top of you. The female detective, the same one who had arrested Barbara, stepped forward. She was much gentler with Alicia. Ma'am, can you stand up for me, please? Alicia just sobbed, shaking her head, unable to move. No, please, no, I didn't mean to. The detective helped her up, pulling her gently to her feet. Let's go, miss. We'll get you processed. They walked her to the door. As she passed me, she stopped. She turned her ravaged, tear-streaked face to me. She was no longer a monster. She was just a child, a lost, broken child. Dad, she whispered, her voice breaking on the single word. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I just looked at her. I couldn't speak. What was there to say? Sorry for what? Sorry for stealing the necklace. Sorry for the conspiracy. Sorry for getting caught. Sorry for being the person she was. Sorry for breaking her mother's heart and then finally mine. It was too late. It was all just too late. I said nothing. I just watched in complete cold silence as the detective led her out of the room. The glass doors slid shut. The latch clicked with a heavy final sound. And I was alone. 6 months. That's how long it took for the dust to settle. Not that it settled quietly. The arrest of the Miller family was an explosion in Atlanta high society. It turned out Richard Miller's shell company wasn't just for stealing my house. It was a front for all sorts of financial crimes. When Howard and the DA pulled that one thread, their whole rotten tapestry unraveled. They were buried in lawsuits not just from me, but from federal investigators. Their empire built on lies and intimidation crumbled, just like I build my structures from the foundation up. Barbara Miller's name, once a staple on every charity board in Buckhead, was now synonymous with disgrace. Richard's business partners abandoned him. They were ruined. Kyle tried to fight just like he screamed he would. He hired an expensive lawyer who tried to argue that Serena's recordings were an invasion of privacy. The judge practically laughed him out of the courtroom. The evidence was too absolute. He was facing decades. And then there was Alicia, my daughter. She sat in a holding cell for 3 days before she finally realized that Kyle wasn't coming, that the Millers weren't coming, that no one was coming for her. Howard arranged the deal. Her testimony in exchange for a lesser charge. I didn't attend that day. Howard told me she stood in court not in a red designer dress, but in a plain gray suit. He said she looked small, and for the first time she told the truth. She told the court everything. About Kyle's manipulation, about his mother's plan, about the pressure, about the greed. She admitted to the theft of the necklace. She admitted to her part in the conspiracy. Her testimony combined with Serena's recordings sealed their fate. Richard and Kyle were found guilty on all counts. Barbara too. They're looking at 10 to 15 years minimum. Alicia, for her cooperation and for the charge of felony theft, received 5 years probation. She's free, in a manner of speaking. I sold the house, the brick house I built with my own hands. I couldn't stay there. The memories were too thick. The ghost of Serena was in every room, but now it was tainted by the memory of Alicia's betrayal, of Kyle's arrogance, of Barbara Miller's voice plotting my destruction. I sold it for its full market value, $1.2 million. Today, I am standing in a different kind of building. It's new. It's in downtown Atlanta in a high-rise not unlike Howard's. But this one isn't dark wood and leather. It's bright. The walls are white, the floors are light oak, and the sun streams in through massive windows. I'm standing in the lobby. On the glass wall in clean, strong letters it reads, "The Serena Price Foundation," and underneath, "Providing legal aid for financially abused seniors." This is what the $18 million was for. Not for me. Not for a life of luxury I never wanted. It was for this. It was Serena's true legacy. It was our legacy. I walk down the hall. It's quiet. I hear the gentle tapping of keyboards. Young lawyers, paralegals, social workers, all hired by Howard, all funded by the foundation, are already at work helping other Morgans, other Serenas. I stop at the end of the hall in front of the main conference room. On the wall is a portrait. Not a painting, just a photograph. It's Serena from 20 years ago at our anniversary. She's not wearing the jade locket. She's just smiling. Her eyes are bright, intelligent, and full of life. I stand there for a long time just looking at her. "I did it, Serena," I whisper. "The words are just for me and for her. I did what you asked. I used your truth to protect our legacy. The vipers are gone. Now." I take a deep breath, feeling a weight I've carried for 2 years finally lift. "Now you can rest." I turn away from the photograph. I am 71 years old. I am a widower. I am a man who lost his daughter. But I am not a victim. I am not confused. And I am not alone. I walk past the bustling offices toward the front door. Howard is waiting for me in the lobby. We have our first case consultation at noon. I am finally free. I have work to do. This story teaches us a hard truth. Greed can poison the deepest family bonds, and trust once broken can be gone forever. But it also shows us that strength isn't about the money you have, but about the dignity you refuse to lose. Serena's hidden wisdom and Morgan's quiet resilience prove that truth, even when buried, is a powerful weapon. It reminds us that kindness should never be mistaken for weakness, and that it is never ever too late to stand up for yourself and reclaim your life from those who underestimate you. What would you have done if you were in Morgan's shoes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.